Anybody know the next one? Anybody know? We know the last one. Gonna be a bright, sunshiny day. I love that you're singing counterpoint rock.
Now they know why we never.
That's why we have a band and not us. We're not singing preachers. This ain't happening. Welcome to Heritage. My name is Michael. I'm one of the pastors here. If you don't mind, before we get started, pull out the connection card you're handing at the door. Fill out that last part. It actually tears off. Please, I don't care if you've been in here 100 times, fill it out so we know you're here. We track this stuff because if somebody comes up missing, we want to find out what happened. Because you're family to us. So please fill this out, put it in the offering bucket on the way out the door. If you're new here, don't feel, just give us information you're comfortable sharing. We won't misuse it or sell it to an email list or anything like that. We just want to get in touch with you. So please fill this out. We'll talk about it again at the end of the service.
My name is Pastor Suzanne. It's good to be with you this morning. If you're a guest here, we welcome you. We know that you have many choices and places to worship, so it's a gift to have you here with us. If Heritage isn't the church for you after you sat through a service with us and you would like some help in trying to find a church home that God would have you to grow in and to serve Him in, please let us know. We'd be glad to help you on your journey because we want to equip you to be able to be all Christ calls you to be.
This is the last message in this series, and I'm kind of sad. I kind of like this series, but if you missed any of them, feel free to get online. They're all online on our website or on our Facebook. Hi, Facebook people, if you're out there. But they're all there if you want to watch. This is critical because it's a new year, really a new decade, and we need to be able to clear the clutter and begin to see life clearly, because the image it's given us right now that the world's given us is a mess. It's a hot mess. Right? I mean, and we need to be able to filter out things and see clearly the way to the future and see what God wants us to see. And the way to see clearly is to be able to figure out what is the most important thing, because the world wants to tell you that everything is important. Everything's critical right now. Even the music on the news is like, dun, 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 dun. You know, it's like, oh my God, what's happening, right? You know, they want you to feel that everything is the most critical thing in the world, and it's not, because if everything's important, nothing's important. And so we have to set our values. It's one's judgment of what's important in life. And it's like we put on sunglasses all the time to filter out harmful things and allow the good light in, or we're just blinded, right? It's the same thing with your values. It filters out the things that you don't need to concern yourself with and helps you focus on the things that are truly important. And when you set your values and you get clear about those, you begin to see clearly.
And so, as we've told you, we did a little exercise with the congregation and with our staff and some of our leadership, and we asked them, what are the values that Heritage Church has? And we whiteboarded it all and gave little tick marks, and there's no way we could cover them all in a message series, but we did pick the top 4. And so, you can go back online, as Michael says, you can check out our first message was one of our values at Heritage Church is authenticity. The second week we talked about one of our values is acceptance. Last week we talked about how one of our values is kids from birth to age 18. We want to take good care of our kids. And today, one of the values that came up in the top 4 was love. Now, love is something that we throw that word around a lot, don't we? How many of you love pizza? Right? How many of you love football? Okay, yeah, we got people who love football. And how many of us love snow days? Yes, all of us, right? We all love snow days. And our world is filled with all these examples of love. I mean, in our movies, we have these rom-coms, you know, we like to watch those. We like to read books about it as well. We've got The Bachelor, right? We've got songs.
Oh, because that's true love.
Most of us, you know, when we come to love, we have like our favorite love songs that we like to hear. But for most of us, when we were first exposed to love, it was in our family, wasn't it? It was in our family, and where we may have been exposed to love. And then maybe later on we grew up and we might have been exposed to a little bit of romantic love and discovered that as well. And then we have children one day, and then we really figure out what love is at that point, don't we? And love, it's so awkward, isn't it? It's beautiful, and it's messy. But at Heritage Church, it's one of our values, and we kind of have a sentence that goes along with each of our values. And for love at Heritage Church, we've decided that we love big. Say that with me. We love big. And you know, our model for being able to love big is Jesus himself. I mean, Jesus loved big, didn't he? And Jesus told us that there were 2 things that we needed to do. Just 2 things. I mean, you go anywhere and you hear all these things we're supposed to be. And Jesus, I like it how he kind of breaks it down for us, right? Jesus told us that we're to love God and we're to love others. And love is the most powerful force on earth. And I think it's the antidote to the world in which we live today. It's the antidote to our apathy. It's the antidote to our greed. It's the antidote to our hatred. It's the antidote to our misery. You see, when we decide we are going to love big, that's a value. And when we live out that value, that's when we'll begin to see clearly.
So, I mean, love should be our main value, right? I mean, it's the two commands that we need to concern ourselves with. It seems so simple, doesn't it? It seems so easy. Then why are we not doing it? Why have we so overthought this very simple idea that we actually end up doing the opposite more often than not in the church? Why is this such a problem? You know, I mean, part of it is, and this ebbs and flows in church life, in Big C church life, not just this church. But we've so become arrogant in our religiosity that we've had to overthink what Jesus made plain and simple. We've elevated this idea that knowledge is king, and that the heart matters in the heart, well, they're secondary. And it's the exact opposite. I mean, how arrogant of us to think we can outthink God, right? How arrogant. We have this cultural arrogance that permeates. It comes, we talk about not mixing the world and the kingdom of God, how they shouldn't mix. That's what's mixing in, is this arrogance that we think we know better than Jesus, right? And it's always been a problem for the church. In Paul, who was a follower of Jesus, planted almost all the churches in the Mediterranean, right? I mean, this guy was amazing. Called out by God to be an apostle. And he faced it in his world. He wrote letters to this place called Corinth. It was a Roman capital in Greece. And in the Greco-Roman world, they elevated knowledge too. There was an arrogance. There was a cultural arrogance there. And Corinth wasn't a great place anyway. It was the Las Vegas of Greece, okay? What happened in Corinth stayed in Corinth. You know what I'm talking about? And I know I'm from Las Vegas, so I get it. I understand the arrogance there. Because when we have a cultural arrogance, we think that the individual is king. That what I say goes. That I know better than anybody. And I get to do whatever I want to do, without regard to what it does to anybody else. And it was that kind of place. And he wrote them this letter, and he said this. He said, listen, we know that we all possess knowledge. But knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. He's trying to show them a different way to think. He's trying to take all the things that happen from here up and say, this is not king. This should drive this, or this is useless. He said, those who think they know something do not yet know as they ought to know. And then he tells them what they really should know. He says, but whoever loves God is known by God. He intentionally uses the same word, know. See, head knowledge, that kind of knowledge, that's all about knowing facts. This knowledge is about knowing you. You ever been in worship? It might have just happened, I don't know, today. Or heard a message or something, and it seemed like there was one part that just hit you, and it was all about you. You know why that is? It's because God knows you intimately. God understands you inside and out, and God will use words that were probably intended for something completely different to touch your heart at a certain moment, because God is working on you, because God knows you, because God loves you, because knowledge of a person and a personality is the seed which love grows from. I can't love you unless I know you. And Paul's saying, you know what? You can be brilliant and divorce your head from your heart, and you got nothing. You got nothing. There's nothing wrong with head knowledge. It's just you have to connect it to this first. It's just that this knowledge is so much more critical than this knowledge. This is King.
Amen.
When we value love, we begin to see clearly.
So this morning, we want to take that phrase, we love big, we want to break it apart. We want to start with the we part. You know, we means united, all of us together. You know, we all know that we is always bigger than me. And this Apostle Paul that Michael was speaking to, he wrote lots of letters in the New Testament. And he wrote one to the Colossians. And in this book, he's talking to Christians, and he's telling them this is how you're supposed to live. And the Apostle Paul says this. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. You know, the Apostle Paul, he's talking and he's telling them, you know, y'all get distracted, just kind of like we get distracted in today's world. And y'all think about earthly things, but you're not thinking about spiritual things. And we are to be all these things. I mean, when is the last time someone outside the church describes Christians as compassionate, kind, humble, gentle, and patient? Right? That's what we're supposed to put on. We're supposed to put that on display. People are supposed to see the God in us. And love is supposed to be the thing that unites us. You know, we live in a world where we're different. We live in a world where we're all imperfect. We live in a world where we're so incredibly divided. And love is the one thing that could unite us. And you know, we've seen it. We've seen it. Just think about in our country, anytime there's a disaster or a tragedy or a massive act of violence, don't you see love on display at that moment? I mean, we've seen it. You know, I think about in our ministry as well. We used to serve a church in Harvest, and in 2011, if you remember, we had the huge tornado outbreak in the state of Alabama. Man, we saw love on display in act after act after act, week after week after week, even starting when the power was off. Y'all remember when your power was off and you had to talk to your neighbors and you had to actually love them like Jesus told us to do, right? I saw love, people taking days, vacation days, to go over and cut down trees in other people's yard. We had a lady wander into our church one morning. I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, I'm not doing so well." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry to hear that." She said, "My daughter died in the tornado." And she said, "I'm in trouble." She said, "I'm in trouble because y'all remember there was a FEMA deadline, and if you didn't get your stuff to the end of the street by the end of the FEMA deadline, you had to pay for it yourself." Do you know that the church loved her so well they paid for that to be done after the fact? Isn't that beautiful? We're at our best when we love. But we forget that. You know, the Beatles wrote a song once. All you need is love. Y'all remember that? You know, that's pretty good. But God even says it better. He says, of all these, the greatest is love. And I think God knew that. He knew we'd struggle maybe being kind and humble and gentle and patient, but maybe, just maybe, we could figure out this love piece. That we could just love people and meet people where they are. The number one thing we got to do when it comes to love, if we're going to love big, is we got to do it together. We've got to be united. We've got to decide that we value love. And when we value love, that's when we will finally see clearly.
Amen.
So we is the first part of that, and love is the second. You know, we're taught if you're a church kid, at least you're taught that God's love is unconditional. And I'm here today to tell you that that's not true. God's love is not unconditional. God's love has a condition. It very much has a condition. That if you choose to receive God's love, you are required to pass it on. That is the condition of God's love. It's the same thing when he says, "Judge not, lest you be judged." If we are to say we are followers of Jesus, we must pass on the love we ourselves have received. Paul says this to the Roman church. He says, "Let no debt remain outstanding." You know, Christians, we're supposed to pay off our debts. Oh, and by the way, we have a financial peace course coming up. So if you're struggling with that, it starts this Wednesday, and you can sign up until that day. So get on the link on the newsletter and sign up if you need to, because we're supposed to pay off our debts, but there's one we can never pay. There's one we can never pay off, except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. All these religious rules that we think if we just fulfill all these rules, if we do this, and this, we check off the list, that somehow God's going to love us more. And he says, no, the only thing you're going to do to check off that list is one checkbox. Love your neighbors. That's it. Pass it on. That's why we say it all the time. That's why our t-shirts say, love, pass it on. That's it. Pure and simple. And we have made it so hard. We justify the harm we have done to our neighbors. You know, the founder of Methodism, the one who inspired the movement that became the Methodist Church, he had 3 rules in his life, 3 values he clung to. One was do no harm. The other was do good. And the last one was stay in love with God. That was it. That's how he lived his life. And we think somehow, some way, that we can love God and be loved by God, and that we owe nothing to anybody else. And it is absolutely a falsehood. And when we live like that, we begin to set standards for God's love, because somehow we made it in, right? You know, so somehow we're amazing enough that God loves us. And we begin to form religions that tell people, here's a bar you got to meet before you can really accept God's love. I'm going to break it down for you. There's not one of us, me, you, any of us, that has a leg to stand on when it comes to God. Not one of you has a right to claim it. I don't have a right to claim it. No one here is holy enough to make God love them more. In fact, the scriptures say that all our righteousness is like dirty rags to God. And the point isn't that you should feel bad about yourself. The point is that you shouldn't judge anybody else, because you don't have a leg to stand on, and neither do I. God's love is so full of grace, and yet when we offer that same love to others, where is the grace in that? Where is the understanding of the tremendous gift that we've received? How much harm have we done by limiting God's love to people as the church? If we say we're going to receive it, we have to give it. And that love does no harm. When we value love, we begin to see clearly.
We've talked about love unites. We've talked about love and how love does no harm. And now we're going to talk about big. And what does that even mean to love big? You know, the Apostle John, he walked the earth with Jesus. He was aware of the crucifixion. He was there. He saw the early church grow and saw the spread of Christianity spread. And he, late in his life, he's off by himself, and he writes some letters. And it's like a wise old man. Have you ever met somebody who's just wise and you just want to sit at their feet and learn? That's what the Apostle John is writing. And he writes these words to us. And he writes them to us tenderly, but I think he also writes them to us a little forcefully. And he talks about this concept of how we could love big. He says, this is how we know what love is. I mean, what does it mean to love big? He said, Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees someone in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. You know, the Apostle John, what he's saying here is he's saying, you know what? You want to know how to love big? You love big by letting Jesus be your example. You see, we've got to let go of what's best for us. And we've got to be like Jesus and think about what is best for others. And we do that when we sacrifice. If there were one concept that I could describe to you that I think Christians have lost, it's the concept of sacrifice. I mean, when we're asked to do something for God, we check our calendars and see, what's going on at work, what's going on with the hobbies, what's going on, and then God. But see, God, when He loved us and called us into a relationship with Him, God asked us to put Him first. He's not second, He's not third, He's not fourth. God is first. And sacrifice is what Jesus did for us, and sacrifice is what we are called to do for Christ. And I think it's what the people from the outside of the church are seeing are a bunch of Christians who aren't willing to sacrifice.
Amen.
Because sacrifice, when you sacrifice, it's going to cost you something. It's going to be inconvenient. It's not going to be on your time schedule. And when you sacrifice, you're so generous. You might not get your Starbucks coffee this week, but you're so generous when you sacrifice. And when you sacrifice, it's without qualifications. You don't get to decide who you sacrifice for. You don't get to decide who's worthy of your sacrifice. That's Jesus' job.
Amen.
We can talk about love all we want. Oh, I love people. Well, if we love people, then we're going to follow it up with some action. It is not enough just to say we love people. We have to follow it up with action. Jesus did, and we need to do it as well. And I am so grateful that you are a church that does these kind of things. Recently we had a situation in our church in January. We had a young girl come to us, and she asked if she could use the church to throw a baby shower. Excuse me, not in January, like in October. And early January, she came in, she looked at the church, and while she was looking at the church, this is a young girl who had ran away from the foster care system, who wound up getting pregnant, as it happens in many people's lives, and she wanted to know if she could have a baby shower here. So she came in October, November timeframe, looked at the room, and while she's looking at the room, she says to me, "What kind of food do you eat at a baby shower? What do you do at a baby shower? I've never been to one." And I said, "Well, you have little sandwiches, and you have little snack things, and you get some presents and all that." And she's like, "Okay, okay." So I'll ask my family, I'll ask some people to help me. Well, in early January, her shower was coming up. She messaged me on Facebook, and she said, "Hey," she said, "I need to cancel this shower." She said, "My family doesn't have the resources; they're not going to be able to do a shower for me." And I said, "By God, we're going to have your shower." I said, "We're going to have your shower." She said, how are you going to have a shower? I said, "Because I got some friends." That's all of you, right? I got some friends who are going to help make this a reality for her. So I said to her, "What's on your registry? What do we need to get you?" So she pulls up her registry, because like any young pregnant person, aren't you excited, or you're getting ready to get married, you want to go to the Target and do the little scanner thing and pick all the things you want? And she sends me a smile, a cryy face on Facebook, says no one's gotten me anything. And I thought, that's okay, I'm going to talk to my friends. And so last weekend we threw a shower for a young girl who never expected it. And who, when she walked in the room, she burst into tears. That's how you love me. And so she's written a note to the church. And if I can read it, I'll read it to you. She said, "Dear Giving Arms, who blessed our lives with love, thank you. 100 times over, thank you. It takes God's prompting to do what you all have done. I'm just a broke kid who made a whoops. And you are the village who've turned my child's beginning into a beautiful blessing. Each and every one of you don't know me, but you listened to a calling. Every gift spoiled this new baby and blessed him beyond comprehension. We are so thankful for all of you. Your selflessness will not go unnoticed in our home and in our lives. It is an act that we will always remember. Our home is a home that you helped build. 100 times thank you, and may God bless you for showing us love." That's how we love big. You see, we are willing to sacrifice. There were people who sacrificed to make this shower happen. There were people who brought food in that morning. There were people who purchased the things on her registry list. It cost them something. There were people who were just generous and just poured it out. And you know what? They did it without qualification. They didn't ask any questions about her life. That's how we love big. That is what God has called us to do. And that is how we love, with action and with truth. And when we value love, that's when we can see clearly.
We look big. It's that easy. We owe it to the world. And it's humbling, learning how to love somebody, because you gotta lay down yourself a little bit and figure them out in order to know how to love. It's a big deal. It's the only deal. It's who we are. It's what we do. And if you need a why, God provides one. We love because He first loved us. And we owe it to the world.
Amen.
We owe it to Him. We can't get past this. This love is conditional. God said, I will offer you everything, but you have to pass it on.
Amen.
And it's humbling to think that we're recipients of that. That love unites us. That love does no harm. And that love sacrifices. That's how you know you're really doing it like God. And when we can love like God, the world sees God. Because the same author said, God is love. And so when we image that to the world by our actions, then they know. Jesus even said, they will know you are my followers by your love. Period. End of sentence. You want to know how to witness to your neighbors? Love them like God did. Pass it on. When we value love, we begin to see clearly. But when we do love, the world sees God clearly.